It's that time of the year, folks. Time to stay up late with your favorite Sixers people as we hang out with you for the
maybe one of your
game.
favorites. I don't know.
All
Derek and I are
here.
a little acidic, I think.
All four of us here.
Devon people like, Kyle and I people put up with. There's a very real difference.
Well, at least they love Bree. How about that? They love Bree. So they get to hang out with all four of us for the 6-game road trip. The 4-game portion out west begins tonight with the Sixers in Salt Lake City to take on the Utah Jazz. Welcome to the PHLY Sixers pregame show presented by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball to get Coors Light delivered or find a store near you. All three of us back together. Happy holidays once again, everyone. Kyle is back with us. Great to have Kyle back after the holidays, and they pick up a great win, Kyle. So we'll start there with the holiday treat that they gave everyone. They had to play. They played at 5 o'clock, and, man, they gave us the best win of the season with their 118-114 victory over the Boston Celtics. And it had, as we talked about it in the game before in the San Antonio game where it had everything, this one had a lot too. Of course, with Tyrese Maxey starring, leading the team and scoring with 33, Joel Embiid with his 27. And then you had the Caleb Martin part, which we'll get to him a little bit more. But your overall thoughts of the game in general for what they presented to us on Christmas Day, and which then made it 8 of 11 for this basketball team.
My overall thoughts were, thank God, man. They needed this week, I would say, right? I think heading into Christmas, coming off of that Spurs win where Joel gets tossed and there's the refereeing controversy, Tyrese is really good. It's like, all right, this could be a potential catalyst, right? But all the wind in their sails dies if they go into Boston and just get shellacked, right? And I think you saw the vision for this team as we imagined when Daryl Morey and the front office made their moves in the summer, right? And I know Derek talked with Tim Legler earlier today, or sometime in the last couple of days, that we posted today on YouTube, talking about the game and about his impression of Philadelphia's defense in that game. That, to me, was the thing that stood out the most, right? I think the Celtics scored something like 90 points per 100 in the half court, which that reflects
their
what
worst half court offensive game of the season.
Yeah, and so they had trouble scoring despite the fact that I think they shot 40+% from three and got into some stuff in transition, because this Sixers team, when they're fully healthy and they can put that 3-wing lineup on the floor, now that Caleb Martin, as you mentioned, Devon, looks like he's arrived for the season, they're switchable. They can get into passing lanes. Tyrese Maxey, frankly, had a really good game on Christmas on both ends, where I thought he made some impact plays on defense, where he has lived up to that offseason cry that he said, part of the reason I'm bulking up is I want to be able to switch. I don't want to be that guy that's excluded from our schemes and our what Nick Nurse's approach is going to be on the defensive end. So obviously, in true Sixers fashion, in the final few minutes, it got dicey, and we're all sitting around like, oh, is it all going to melt away? But I think it was finally, even without Paul George, basically, Paul George making contributions as a passer and defender, not as a shooter, even without him playing well offensively, they look like a team that can be a legitimate two-way force at their best. And so that is all you really wanted to take away from that game, right? If nothing else, it's like, this is a team that can compete with the big boys. And you can make the excuses of Drew Holiday and Porzingis picks up the injury, whatever it is. As we always say, gentlemen, it's survival mode. It does not matter. Getting these wins against good teams, bad teams, one of which we're going to see tonight in Utah. Get them all. Play as well as you can for the time being. And so I'm very encouraged. I was happy to be checked out during the game, but getting updates on my phone and from friends, family, like, yo, are you watching this game? Like, people getting excited again. That's all I personally can ask for, is for some juice to be back and some hope to be here, so we don't have to try to spin a yarn about what's going on right now. And by the way, we just got the official starting 5 for tonight. Joel Embiid is indeed playing. He is in, and it's the same lineup as on Christmas. So that's a good sign. He's back on the floor again.
Yep. Embiid in, Drummond out, Gordon out, and obviously McCain and KJ are out as well. So I think Drummond and Gordon both came in questionable, or they started off probable and downgraded to questionable and now out. It's been a whole thing throughout the course of the day. It's been changing. But Embiid in, Drummond and Gordon out, and then obviously McCain and KJ, like I said.
All right, so
All
Derek,
things, it's a pretty normal injury report. Like, you know, we've had way worse.
Moving in the right direction, fellas.
Yeah.
On like every front. That's all we can ask for.
That's absolutely right. That's all we can ask for in this one. So we do move on just a little bit as Kyle gave his thoughts. We talked about, of course, post game on Christmas Day. Derek and I did with Bree, and moving on to the fact that Derek, they are now 8 of 11 in this.
Derek's cat has something to say about that Celtics game, I think, but not sure they're able to properly articulate their thoughts. So have to save that for the post game show, I guess.
Yeah, just keep walking by the screen, part of the show when we're at home. So it's all good. Louis as well. You know, when Louis decides that it's time to check in, it's all good. But Derek now 8 of 11 for this basketball team after that great win on Christmas Day, and starting to get some momentum here. Tough loss, as we discussed, against Cleveland on that Saturday night game just a week ago. But in general, looking, as Kyle pointed out, you got to win the games that are in front of you. They lose that one. But overall, the last 11, 8 of the last 11, and they're starting to inch up, as we discussed a little bit on Christmas Day on the postgame. They're starting to inch up in the standings there with help from others, with Brooklyn and Detroit maybe losing some games there. But 8 of 11, what are you seeing from this team over these last 11 to give you a little bit of hope that things are starting to fall back into place with some normalcy with this basketball team that has yet to really be there?
Yeah, well, it really does start for me on the defensive end. Like I talked with Legler earlier today, they have the basis of a really good unit, and you start running through some of the numbers with the Oubre and the Paul George and the Caleb trio, which started the season as a starting lineup, and defensive numbers for them have always been really good. They were an absolute train wreck defensively to start the season, in part because Joel Embiid was missed the first 9 games, which is where a bulk of those minutes came from, but in part because Caleb and Kelly just couldn't shoot. Their numbers on drives were disastrous. It was bad all around, but defensively it was really strong. And now you add Joel Embiid into that mix, and when those 4 are on the court, their defensive rating has been incredible. Now it's can the offense catch up with them? And what you saw against the Celtics was so much of, they can match up better with that Celtics core than they have been throughout the course of the Joel Embiid era, really. And you really saw the versatility they have, the way that they're able to switch on the perimeter, the way that they were able to fight through screens, the playmaking they have. It really all came together defensively. And even if Tatum had a big night numbers wise, he had to work for it. He had to make some really tough shots to get there. And the process of the Sixers defending the Celtics was, I think, really, really good. So now it's all right. You have that base. Can you add on top of that? And we've seen, the Embiid Maxey 2-man game through periods now with Joel Embiid coming back, where it's been really, really good. Hasn't always been the case, but we've certainly seen periods with that. You've seen Maxey's playmaking take a jump. You've seen Maxey's shooting take a jump. I don't think that is, I don't think that's coincidental. I think both of those are greatly enhanced with Joel back. And now it's, can you get Paul George going at the same time as those two? And if you do that, I really do think the sky's the limit. Obviously, Caleb making shots. If you start looking into his numbers, he made 28% of his total 3-pointers on the season in that game against Boston. 28%, literally more than a quarter of his made threes came in one game. Over that 2-game stretch, the Spurs, then the Celtics, he increased his 3-point percentage from like 26% up to 36%. He is now having one of the better 3-point shooting seasons of his career, if you can believe that, almost entirely based on the backs of the last 2 games. But can that be legitimate? Can you get to the point where he is a viable offensive player, at least making enough shots where you can keep his defense on the floor, because he's been one of the more consistent, one of the more reliable defensive players on this team. And if you add him into that Oubre and Paul George mix, and Paul George has been great defensively all season, then I really do think you have something to build on. And I think it was great that, over this 11-game stretch where they've won 8 of, they had some, seemed like 84 games against the Charlotte Hornets mixed in there. That's great. That helped them get the feet under them. But now you add in these 2 wins over the Spurs and the Celtics, and it's really something to, boost the morale, to give themselves confidence, and maybe hopefully to be a springboard into getting them back into the playoff hunt.
So bringing up Caleb, I think there are some downstream effects of Caleb being certainly I'm not expecting him to shoot 7 and 9 every game, right? But if Caleb can be that average to slightly above average shooter that I think you're hoping for coming into the season, then all of a sudden those lineups with Yabu at the 5 that we've been fairly bullish on, right? But there have been a lot of wonky lineup combinations you have to throw out there. And to get shooting on the floor, you end up with these lineups where it's like Maxey and Lauri and Yabu, and you're just putting so many defensive problems, now not the same problems, but defensive problems all the same, on the floor at the same time. Whereas if Caleb shoots well, and you basically just say, hey, we're going to play one small guard and then continue to load up on wings and athleticism and guys who can get after it defensively and still get the benefits of Yabu as that small ball 5 and space teams out and make them play in one-on-one situations, those lineups become a lot more dangerous than they are when you're trying to force, like Kyle Lowry and Maxey and Yabu, or Eric Gordon and Lowry and Yabu. If it can be Kyle Lowry, but it's also Paul George and Caleb and Kelly, and then it's Yabu, then those are lineups that can be potential playoff lineups, right? And so I think Caleb is a really important swing piece. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be Caleb, right? Or it could be if Ricky Council were to be a reliable rotation player, if one of these bench athletes is a reliable, like KJ, obviously, before he got hurt, and he's dealing with that right now. If one of those guys can be a big minute guy for this team, whether it's off the bench or whether it's starting, a lot of your backup lineups just start making so much more sense. And this team was built with a vision of, not just making Joel's life easier when he's on the floor, but making sure this team has a chance to compete and win minutes and win games when he's off the floor. And so Caleb becomes this really important piece that has a knock-on effect on so many different lineups. So I should have mentioned as we open the show on the Boston stuff, what a moment for Yabu in Boston, right? And those lineups that they played the start of the fourth quarter, they had so much success that when did Paul and Joel check back in? Something like the 4.5 minute mark.
4 minute mark.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yep. Like that. The concept just sounds so crazy, right? That you could go the first 7, almost 8 minutes of the fourth quarter and say, hey, Paul and Joel, you can get some well-earned rest on the bench, right? Like what a luxury to have. And that's a credit to Tyrese, certainly, for being, the leader of those lineups, but also to Yabu and the rest of those guys for making that work.
And it was a big discussion too, Kyle, while we were watching it, of should Nick Nurse bring back Joel Embiid and Paul George because of the way that they were playing it. And if then things started to happen, the Celtics made it a little bit of a run, forced a few turnovers there. And we know how things happen. Joel had to come in there at the game to help close things out. But you're absolutely right for Yabusele to be in that spot once again, to be able to hold his own, because it was also one of the things that we discussed was how are they going to rebound the basketball with Porzingis before he got hurt starting the game. And of course, looking at their lineup, knowing that Jason Tatum in particular will help out on the glass the way that he does. How are they going to rebound when they go to the bench if Andre Drummond is out? And we saw it. He held his own. He may not have had big rebounding numbers, but he held his own for the time that he was out there. Tyrese Maxey got in there in the fourth quarter a little bit, collected a few. You saw some of the other teammates get in there as well and collect those rebounds. And one of the other parts too, Kyle, was the fact that they just protected the basketball. They only had 2 turnovers through 3 quarters, and it was really 3.5 quarters until Tyrese Maxey had those 3 in the fourth quarter late. In that
they saved them all up for the fourth quarter, apparently.
You're right. They're way better, 4 points better than Boston Celtics. So let's make it interesting here on Christmas Day. But no, man, I mean, they did a really good job of giving themselves every opportunity. When we talk about Nick Nurse, oftentimes we'll point out where there are things that he needs to do better. We need to point out him in our show of what he did wrong. Well, in this case, he did a lot of things right, and you got to give credit to him, the game plan, what they did, the players for executing it, protecting the basketball the way that they did in that win over the Boston Celtics. And that goes to the Yabusele piece. Caleb Martin getting the start, which we thought, Kyle, we were wondering who was going to be that fifth starter, with whether going to be Caleb Martin or Yabusele against that Boston team because of the rebounding piece, and also Yabusele having to be that primary backup center to Joel Embiid. Where were they going to go? He called the right number, and he went with Caleb Martin, and you got the best outing from him this season.
I will say one of the things that was cool after the game was seeing how happy and excited those guys all were for Caleb. Like, obviously, we've known he's been dealing with shoulder issues, and he's had some other knocks and bumps and bruises and different things he's been dealing with, but he just kept plugging away. They finally got him a little bit of time off as they got healthier as a team. And for him to come back and have a couple of good games in a row against good competition and sort of reward the thought of, oh, well, this is why we got this guy. But to see that the team is still together at this point, I think is really important, right? We talked a lot during the worst moments of this season about how things can spiral. And in a locker room where there's not a lot of continuity and, long-standing relationships, that it only takes a certain amount of time before it's like a bomb went off, right? Like something is just going to go down and the whole season's derailed. And so the fact that they have this, shared happiness for one another, for whether it's Joel coming back and having a good game, whether it's Maxey coming back playing a good game, or whether it's Caleb Martin, a role player, finally stepping up and looking like the guy that they know he can be, you still sense that feeling of collective joy. And I think that's a really important thing that they've been able to hold on to, because between players only meeting, between Joel getting in a scrap with a media member, getting thrown out of games, and the various injuries and all the stuff that's being said on the outside, at the end of the day, what matters is those guys being able to keep that locker room whole and together. And at least for now, it appears they've been able to do that long enough that now they've given themselves a runway and a chance to maybe start making a push up these standings as long as they can stay healthy.
And as you, Kyle, continue to see Paul George, good defense, as we know, get an opportunity once again to see that trio of wings get a start. Really good defensive performance from the three against the Boston Celtics, but his offense, the shooting in particular, 0 for 7, not there once again, even though they were able to come away with the win. Had his shot fallen a little bit, maybe it would have been a bit of an easier win. Did not happen. Any concern there with the defense being there, but the shot still not falling? Any concern for you at this point for Paul George?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're pretty deep into the season at this point, right? This is not when it's a 5-game sample. It's easy enough to be like, okay, he's going to get it together at some point. But we're now almost in the year 2025, and Paul George has yet to have the type of shooting success that any of us expected. Now, I do think what
really only 2 games, just 2 games.
2 games where it was, that's the Paul George that they got in the offseason, or they paid all that money to in the offseason. He looks like that guy. Yeah, it was the New York game and the Charlotte game, and that's pretty much it. Now, he's been able to – I think he's been a floor raiser for this team, which I think is very important, right? And it's important specifically because they've had no idea what they're going to get from Joel in terms of his availability or his production night to night. So helping them steady things defensively, helping them with the playmaking has been very important. But yeah, I mean, look, I do think he's going to shoot well eventually. I don't think Paul George, it would be of all the guys who forgot how to shoot in Philadelphia, it would be by far the craziest one, right? Because his track record is the longest. He's had the most success as a catch and shoot guy of any, big name player that they brought in here. For that to just go away, I don't believe that, but I'm not sure what the answer is going to be, right? Because the offense is still going to run primarily through Joel and Tyrese, and they're going to have to find ways to make sure that they strike that proper balance between, hey, Paul's involved, and we're finding Paul in his spots and his comfort zones, which they always get him that I think it's like the left, same spot that Joel likes, the left mid post.
Yep.
And getting like a little fadeaway jumper early in the game. Whether they need to do a couple more of those, I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but whatever they can do, and that's going to involve conversations with Paul to figure out what's going on and how to get him rolling in the right direction. They got to do it because this is good enough for now. But once it gets to, the big time and the big stage and you're playing a lot of good teams instead of just a couple in a short span, they need Paul George to be Paul George in a big way.
Derek, when you talked to Tim Legler, you and he talked about the two-man game needing to get going a little bit. While we know about Maxey and Embiid, the Paul George and Embiid two-man game needs to also get going a little.
Yeah, and obviously go listen to that. You can listen to Legs describe it for yourself. It's only like a 15-minute show, so you can. I mean, don't leave now, but like maybe during halftime you can go listen to it. But if you wanted to, you could go. But please stick with us until the end. Yeah, I mean, look, what I'll say is that for a lot of players, when the shot's not going in, their effort and their focus wanes. And I give Paul a lot of credit because even when his shot's not going in, his defense is there. He's locked in as a team defender, as a one-on-one defender. The effort is there. So he will find a way to, impact the game in ways that other players, when their shot's not going in, don't. But boy, it would be nice. And look, we just saw it with Caleb Martin. You can we may be, a good 2 months into the season. It's still relatively small sample size. I in my heart, I do not believe that Paul George has forgotten how to shoot. And I don't think that he doesn't have the lift to get it there. He's got deep range still. I have no concerns about that long term. But we are talking about 130 attempts now for Paul. This is not a small sample size anymore. It would be great. Obviously when it's been he and Maxey without Embiid is when he has had his big games. It would be great for him to have that two-man chemistry so that when that perimeter shot's not going, he can find a way to play off of Joe in ways that Maxey plays off of Joe to get to the free throw line, to get to the rim, to get to the spots that he's comfortable. He's just not there yet. I don't really have too much of a problem with the fact that two-man chemistry isn't all that developed. They haven't played all that many minutes together. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's not all that many. But it does make it frustrating because we are sitting here evaluating a very expensive new piece of the puzzle, and we have so little time with your centerpiece. And he's at an age where you worry, so you just don't know how to sort of weight everything. Like I said, heart of hearts, I think he's going to eventually make shots, but I do think they need to find a way to get him easy ones, specifically to use Embiid's gravity in that two-man game to get him easy ones. So when he's struggling, he can impact the game offensively, but that's probably going to take some time.
All right, speaking of struggling, the Utah Jazz, 7-22. They are not very good. They are not very good. We were at one point during the season, we were saying this about the 76ers, and they have strung together some games, and we'll see how things eventually go. Only 4 games better in the win column are the 76ers, but this Jazz team is really not all that good. Only 3 wins at home, and they have been struggling quite a bit to win. They have lost 7 of their last 10, and we've talked about this in the beginning of the season of, are they looking at in the sweepstakes of Cooper Flag and all of that?
Yes.
Yes.
The answer
exactly.
is
yes. Ring the bell, Derek. yes. And they're not good. They are not good. So as we talked about this with the Sixers and looking at their schedule, starting off with Boston as the start off the 6-game road trip, they ended with the Brooklyn Nets next Saturday in Brooklyn. But in between there, you have 4 games on the road that are some winnable ones, starting with the Utah Jazz tonight. So with this one, Kyle, you look at this basketball team, and we said this before when they were trying to get to 7 wins, quite frankly, for the Sixers, that there were some winnable games there. They took care of business against the Charlotte Hornets. They need to take care of business against the team, even on the road against the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, look, these are the games that are going to get you back toward where you need to be, or they're the games we will look back on in late March, mid-April, whenever, and say that was when they really sunk themselves and put themselves in deep in the play-in tournament or right on the fringe or whatever it is. They, by virtue of getting 2 good wins this week against San Antonio and Boston, Now you got some momentum behind you. Now you've said, all right, we can beat the big boys, but now come the taking care of business wins, right? And while it'd be great if they came out tonight and won by, 20, 25 points and it's a laugher and they get to rest, like, I ultimately don't really care beyond the fact that the main guys start to look, as Derek was talking about, with the Paul George synergy in these different looks with Joel and figuring some of that stuff out. As long as they're making some progress on that, and as long as they're getting a win, you just got to bank as many as you can right now. You're not winning a championship in late December, and it doesn't necessarily matter how pretty or how ugly it is. Now, I would hope that it's not ugly, right? This is not a team with a ton of firepower. John Collins, who is having a good season this year, by the way, who we talked about in the offseason, he's out tonight. So that's one of their useful veterans, not going to be available for these guys. So that helps you in the front court battle. Maybe you play a little smaller. Maybe you can find some time for good friend Adam Bonus, also known as Adem Bona, his actual name. So, yeah, just look, they get to play a team like this. They're going to play Portland. They're going to play a Sacramento team that just fired their head coach this week. They're going to play a Golden State team that started the season off well, but has really been sputtering. And, there's a lot of noise coming out of there about potentially needing another trade. And what are they doing with Kuminga? This is a golden opportunity this upcoming week, starting tonight, to really start making some inroads and putting some pressure on the teams above them in the standings.
Yeah, it's a tough stretch in the sense that they have like 5 games in 8 days coming up here. It's a real jam-packed schedule. Thank you, Cup. But it's not all that difficult of opponents. Like, they certainly have a chance. They have one back-to-back, so certainly you expect Joe to miss one of these games. You wonder if he's going to miss another, but they have a chance to pick up some wins and need to get it done.
Absolutely. All right, folks, it's that time. It is that time. It is the Bet365 pick segment, courtesy of Bet365. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Bree, Derek, we had a pretty good night again on Christmas. We're rolling. We're in a good
Gambling Gibbons,
what do you
baby.
mean? This is all you, buddy. I don't want to take any credit, because when you stink, I don't want to take any blame either.
All right.
Gambling Gibbons time, everybody.
I'm in a good place, Kyle. I'm in a good place. And we might as well do so again, keep it going against a Jazz team where the spread went a little different. Sixers by 7 is the number here. And I went with that 7. I was tempted to go under, but with this one, even if they are blowing this team out and they get locked in, I think at some point that free throws down the stretch, they make them, that they will be able to pull away and get a much bigger victory here this evening in Utah. And I also went with Tyrese Maxey, who has found the shooting touch once again with 3+ made 3-pointers from beyond the 3-point line. And that is a same game parlay of +165. And you all can go ahead and check that out once again at Bet365, our pregame pick segment. Use code PHLY365 when you sign up, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 plus and physically located in Pennsylvania. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, fellas, it's pretty much just about that time. The tip time is almost upon us. So just asking you, how do you feel? Feeling pretty good about this one as we get ready to sit there and watch this game?
Yeah, this team stinks.
Yeah,
you should be able to win this one.
I agree.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that one.
Not going to overthink it, right? Bad team coming off of – now, look, I think Utah might have a chance to make it interesting early. You coming off the high of the emotional win on Christmas. But ultimately, they got to get this one.
Yep, I agree. They take care of business. Our pregame show was brought to you by Coors Light. Visit CoorsLight.com/PHLY basketball to get Coors Light delivered or find a store near you. For Kyle, Derek, Bree, I'm Devon. We'll be back after the game. We hope that you can hang out with us, get that caffeine ready, get that tea, coffee, soda, whatever you're doing, get it ready. It's a Saturday night. You might as well hang out with us.
Sixers after dark, baby.
Might as well. We'll talk to you after the game. Enjoy.